Black single dad found a newborn in his truck on New Year's Eve. The note in her blanket changed everything. On the coldest night of his life, a single dad opened his truck door, found a crying baby, and inside her blanket, a note that revealed a truth so shocking it could destroy or save everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The winter air bit through Marcus Reed's worn jacket as he pulled down the garage door of Jake's auto shop. His fingers, still bearing traces of engine grease despite thorough washing, trembled slightly in the cold. The streetlights cast long shadows across the empty parking lot, their yellow glow reflecting off patches of frost that had already started forming on the asphalt. Another year almost done, he muttered to himself, checking his phone. 10:45 p.m. At least he'd make it home before midnight to ring in the new year with his sleeping daughter and Aunt Thelma. A smile touched his tired face at the thought of his little girl, probably already tucked in bed, and his aunt who'd insisted on staying over. The day's work weighed heavy on his shoulders. 3 oil changes, 2 brake jobs, and a stubborn transmission that had taken hours longer than expected. But complaining wasn't his style. Every job meant food on the table and rent paid on time. That's what mattered. Marcus patted his pocket, making sure he had his wallet and keys. The familiar jingle of metal against metal was reassuring. His footsteps echoed in the empty lot as he walked toward his old pickup truck. Its blue paint faded from years under the southern Sunday. The truck might not have been much to look at, but it was paid for and reliable, just like him, Aunt Thelma always said. A sharp wind whipped around the corner of the building, making him pull his jacket tighter. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees since sunset, unusual even for a December night in their small town. His breath came out in visible puffs as he quickened his pace. "Lord, it's cold," he said, his words disappearing into the night air. The forecast had mentioned possible snow, a rare event that would have his daughter bouncing off the walls with excitement tomorrow morning if it came true. As he approached his truck, Marcus fished his keys from his pocket, the metal cold against his calloused palm. The security light above cast enough brightness to show his truck covered in a light frost, like sugar dusted over a cake. He could already picture tomorrow morning, helping his daughter make her first snowman if the weather held up. The thought of home, of warmth, of family, pushed him forward through the cold. Just a 15-minute drive, and he'd be able to peek in on his sleeping daughter, thank Aunt Thelma for watching her, and maybe even catch the ball drop on TV if he wasn't too tired. Marcus reached for the driver's side door handle, his mind already halfway home, but something stopped him. A sound, faint but unmistakable, cut through the quiet night air. He froze, key hovering near the lock. There it was again, a cry. Small, weak, coming from inside his truck. Marcus's heart jumped into his throat. He quickly stepped back, scanning the cab through the frosted windows. The security light's glare made it hard to see clearly, but something was definitely on the passenger seat, something that shouldn't be there. With trembling fingers, he unlocked the door and yanked it open. The dome light flickered on, illuminating the interior of his truck. The cry came again, clearer now, and Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. There, on his passenger seat, wrapped in what looked like little more than a thin blanket, was a baby, a tiny newborn baby girl, her face scrunched up against the cold, her cries growing stronger as the light hit her face. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered, his voice shaking. "Oh my dear God." The baby squirmed in her makeshift swaddle, and as she moved, something white caught his eye, a folded piece of paper, tucked into the folds of the blanket. Marcus stood there, frozen, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. The baby continued to cry, each wail growing more insistent in the quiet night. The shock that had rooted him to the spot finally broke. Marcus reached out with unsteady hands, gently touching the blanket. It was thin, far too thin for such a cold night, and the baby's skin felt chilled. A wave of protective instinct washed over him, pushing aside his confusion and disbelief. Hey there, little one," he said softly, his voice cracking. "It's okay. You're okay." The note peeked out from the blanket, begging to be read, but Marcus's first thought was for the child's warmth. With careful movements, he shrugged off his jacket, ignoring the bite of the cold air against his arms. He gently wrapped it around the blanket, creating an extra layer of protection against the winter night. The baby's cries softened slightly at the additional warmth, turning into small whimpers that tugged at Marcus's heart. In the dome light's glow, he could see her face clearly now. Tiny features, dark skin, and eyes that seemed to hold a familiar shape that stirred something deep in his memory. Marcus stood there, one hand protectively cradling the bundle, his mind racing with questions. Who had put her here? How long had she been in the cold? Why his truck? The note surely held answers, but fear kept him from reaching for it just yet. Reading it would make this real, too real, and right now, his only clear thought was getting this baby somewhere warm and safe. His phone felt heavy in his pocket. He needed to call the police, call an ambulance, call someone. But first, he had to make sure this tiny life was out of danger. With movements more gentle than he knew he possessed, Marcus carefully lifted the bundle, cradling the baby against his chest. She was so small, so fragile, her weight barely registering in his strong mechanic's hands. The note shifted as he moved her, the white paper stark against the dark blanket. Marcus's heart pounded as he looked at it, knowing that whatever words it contained would change everything. He glanced down at the baby's face, now calmer against his chest, then back at the note that promised answers he wasn't sure he was ready for. His breath came out in visible puffs in the cold night air as he stood there, holding this unexpected gift, this tremendous responsibility, this miracle or burden. He wasn't sure which yet. The garage's security light hummed above, the night stretched out around him, and in his arms, a newborn baby girl waited for whatever would come next. Marcus's breath came out in white puffs as he stared at the tiny bundle on his passenger seat. The baby's cry had softened to a whimper, but his heart was thundering so loud he could barely hear anything else. With trembling hands, he reached for the folded piece of paper tucked into the blanket. The cab light cast a weak yellow glow as he fumbled with the note. The paper was cheap notebook material, torn hastily from a spiral binding. His oil-stained fingers left slight smudges on the edges as he unfolded it. 7 words, that's all there was. 7 words that turned his world upside down. Please raise her. She's yours. Marcus read the message 3 times, his mind refusing to process what was happening. The handwriting was rushed, desperate even, but something about it tugged at his memory. He couldn't place it, though, not with his thoughts spinning like tires on ice. This can't be happening, he whispered, his voice hoarse. The baby stirred, making tiny sounds that pierced straight through his chest. He looked at her tiny face, barely visible in the dim light. Her skin was a warm brown, a shade lighter than his own. Questions crashed through his mind like a pileup on the highway. Who would leave their baby in his truck? Why him? Why tonight of all nights? The temperature gauge on his dashboard showed 28 degrees, much too cold for a newborn to be out here. With shaking hands, he carefully pulled back the thin blanket. The baby couldn't have been more than a few days old. She wore only a simple white onesie underneath. No proper winter clothing, no diaper bag, nothing but this threadbare blanket and that mysterious note. Lord, give me strength, he muttered, running a hand over his face. The baby's whimpers grew stronger, and something protective stirred in his chest. Whatever was going on, this little one needed help right now. Marcus shrugged off his work jacket, ignoring the cold that immediately bit through his long-sleeved shirt. With movements more gentle than he knew he possessed, he wrapped the jacket around the bundle, creating an extra layer of warmth. "It's okay, little one," he whispered, surprised by the tenderness in his own voice. "We're gonna figure this out." He reached for his phone, then hesitated. Police? Social services? His mind raced through the possibilities, but one thought kept coming back. The hospital. The baby needed to be checked out first, make sure she was healthy. Everything else could wait. Carefully, he lifted the bundle from the passenger seat. The baby felt impossibly small in his large, work-roughened hands. He cradled her against his chest, and to his amazement, her cries settled into soft cooing sounds. "First things first," he said softly. "Let's get you somewhere warm and safe." Marcus looked down at the tiny face pressed against his chest. Despite the chaos of the moment, despite the fear and confusion swirling in his mind, something about holding this little one felt right. Like his arms had been waiting to hold her without him even knowing it. He offered up a quiet prayer, his words forming small clouds in the cold air. "Lord, I don't understand what's happening here, but I need your guidance. Help me do right by this child." The truck's engine growled to life, and the heater slowly began pushing warm air into the cab. Marcus adjusted the baby in his arms one more time, making sure she was secure and warm, before putting the truck in gear. The clock on his dashboard read 11:47 p.m. New Year's Eve was almost over, but this night was far from finished. As he pulled out of the auto shop's parking lot, the truck's headlights cut through the darkness like twin beams of hope. The hospital was only 15 minutes away, but Marcus knew these would be the longest 15 minutes of his life. Every small sound from the bundle in his arms made his heart jump. Every movement caused him to glance down anxiously. The streets were mostly empty, with only the occasional car heading to or from New Year's celebrations. Christmas lights still hung on many of the buildings they passed, twinkling like stars against the dark storefronts. The baby stirred again, and Marcus found himself humming softly, the same lullaby he used to sing to his daughter when she was small. "Almost there, little one," he murmured, carefully navigating through the empty streets. The hospital's emergency room sign glowed like a beacon in the distance, growing larger with each passing moment. Marcus held the baby closer, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her tiny chest against his own. Every curve in the road, every stop sign was taken with extra care. Marcus had never driven so carefully in his life, acutely aware of the precious cargo he carried. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical thing, but somehow it didn't feel like a burden. Instead, it felt like purpose. As the hospital's entrance drew closer, Marcus whispered another prayer. Whatever came next, he knew this night would change everything. The emergency room's bright lights beckoned through the frosty night, promising warmth, safety, and answers to the countless questions tumbling through his mind. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room waiting area cast harsh shadows across Marcus's face as he paced back and forth. His work boots left scuff marks on the worn linoleum floor, each step heavy with worry. The mechanic's coveralls he still wore felt out of place among the sterile white walls, and he absently rubbed at a grease stain on his sleeve. His mind raced with questions. Who had left the baby? Why in his truck? Could she really be his? The drive to the hospital had been a blur, him whispering prayers while keeping one eye on the tiny bundle secured in the crook of his arm. Nurse Clara approached him with a gentle smile. She was middle-aged with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Mr. Reed, the baby's doing well, Doctor. Thompson is examining her now, but from what we can see, she's only a few days old and appears healthy." Marcus stopped pacing, his shoulders sagging with relief. "Thank God," he whispered. She was so cold when I found her." "We've got her warmed up now," Clara assured him, touching his arm. "Someone took good care to wrap her properly, despite everything. She's a beautiful little thing, about 6 pounds, good color, strong lungs." Marcus nodded, running a hand over his face. "I just can't believe," he trailed off, pulling the note from his pocket and showing it to the nurse. The paper was creased from how many times he'd unfolded and refolded it, studying those 7 words. Clara read it, her expression softening. "Oh my, this is quite a situation, isn't it?" She handed the note back. "Have you had any recent relationships that might explain?" "There was someone," Marcus admitted quietly. "About 9 months ago, Candace. We dated briefly, but she disappeared without a word." He swallowed hard. "Haven't heard from her since." Another nurse hurried past, pushing a cart of supplies, and Marcus stepped aside. The emergency room buzzed with activity around them. Phones ringing, monitors beeping, voices calling out in medical shorthand he didn't understand. But his world had narrowed to this moment, This situation, this tiny life that had been thrust into his care. I need to know, he said finally. If she's really mine, I need to be sure. Dr. Thompson appeared then, a tall woman with auburn hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Mr. Reed? Let's talk. She gestured to some nearby chairs, and Marcus sank into one, his legs suddenly weak. The baby is doing very well. No signs of distress or exposure. Whoever left her made sure she was fed recently. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Is there a way to know? To be certain if she's mine? Given the circumstances, the note, the way she was left, we can expedite DNA testing, Doctor, Thompson explained. We'd normally need a court order, but this is clearly an unusual situation. We can have results within hours instead of days. Please, Marcus said immediately. Whatever it costs, I'll figure it out. I just need to know. While a nurse drew his blood for the test, Marcus pulled out his phone. His hands shook slightly as he dialed his aunt's number. It was well past midnight now, officially New Year's Day. The phone rang 4 times before Aunt Thelma's voice, thick with sleep, answered. Marcus, child, what's wrong? Is Layla okay? Aunt Thelma, he began, then paused, realizing how incredible this would sound. I'm at the hospital. Layla's fine, she's still sleeping at home, but… He took a deep breath. Someone left a baby in my truck tonight, with a note saying she's mine. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Aunt Thelma finally breathed. Start from the beginning, Marcus. Tell me everything. He explained about finding the baby, the note, bringing her to the emergency room. His aunt listened without interrupting, though he could hear her soft exclamations of shock. They're doing a DNA test now, he finished. Should know in a few hours. I'm coming down there, Aunt Thelma declared. Let me call Sister Jenkins to check on Layla, and I'll be there soon as I can get dressed. Aunt Thelma, you don't have to. Don't you tell me what I have to do, Marcus Reed, she cut him off firmly. If that baby turns out to be my great niece, I aim to be there from the very beginning. Now, you sit tight and pray. I'm on my way. Marcus ended the call and closed his eyes, doing exactly what his aunt had instructed. Lord, he whispered, if she's mine, give me the strength to do right by her. And if she's not, he couldn't finish that thought. Despite only knowing of her existence for a few hours, the idea of letting that tiny girl go already felt impossible. The hospital corridor seemed longer than Marcus remembered as he walked hand in hand with Layla toward the doctor's office. His daughter skipped alongside him, her pink backpack bouncing with each step, while his own feet felt heavy with worry. Daddy, is the baby still here? Layla asked, her voice echoing in the quiet hallway. No, sweetheart, she's in the special nursery while we wait for some important papers. Marcus squeezed her small hand, drawing strength from her presence. He'd spent the last 2 days explaining everything to her, how someone had left a baby in his truck, how the doctors needed to do tests, and how they needed to be patient. They reached the office door with Dr. Sarah Chen printed in neat letters. Marcus took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and knocked. Come in. A warm voice called from inside. The office was cozy, with pale blue walls and framed children's artwork. Dr. Chen, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, stood up from behind her desk. Mr. Reed, thank you for coming in. She smiled at Layla. And who do we have here? I'm Layla. His daughter bounced on her toes. Is this about my maybe baby sister? Dr. Chen gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Island, please, have a seat. Marcus lifted Layla onto one of the chairs before settling into the other. His palms were sweaty, and his heart thumped so loud he wondered if everyone else could hear it. The past 48 hours had been a blur of paperwork, questions from social services, and endless prayers. First, let me assure you that the baby is doing very well. Dr. Chen began, pulling out a folder. She's maintaining a healthy weight, and all her initial tests came back normal. Marcus nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Layla swung her legs back and forth, hitting the chair legs with her light-up sneakers. Now, about the DNA results. Dr. Chen opened the folder, and Marcus felt his whole world pause. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. The rustle of papers, the tick of the wall clock, even his own breathing. "Daddy?" Layla's small voice cut through his anxiety. She reached over and took his hand again, just like he'd done for her countless times when she was nervous. Dr. Chen looked up, her expression gentle. "Mr. Reed, the tests show with 99.9% certainty that you are the baby's biological father." The words hit Marcus like a wave, washing away the tension he'd been carrying. He slumped in his chair, tears pricking at his eyes. She's really mine?" "Yes, she island." Dr. Chen smiled warmly. "Congratulations, I have a sister." Layla jumped up from her chair, her excitement too big to contain. "Daddy, I have a real sister. Can we see her? Can we take her home? Can I help feed her? Can she sleep in my room?" Marcus pulled Layla into a tight hug, his shoulders shaking with emotion. "Hold on there, princess. One thing at a time." Dr. Chen gave them a moment, quietly arranging papers on her desk. When Marcus looked up again, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, she continued, "There are some things we need to discuss about next steps. Social services will need to be involved, given the unusual circumstances of how you received custody." "But she's my daughter," Marcus said, his voice stronger now. "That has to count for something, right?" "It absolutely does," Dr. Chen assured him. "The DNA results will be crucial in establishing your parental rights. However, there are protocols we must follow to ensure everything is properly documented and that the baby's best interests are protected." Layla tugged at Marcus's sleeve. "Does this mean we get to take our baby home?" Marcus looked at Dr. Chen questioningly. She nodded. "Once the paperwork is processed and social services gives their approval, yes. We'll need to keep her here for another day or two for observation, but she's healthy and thriving. Did you hear that, baby girl?" Marcus turned to Layla, whose face was glowing with joy. "You're going to be a big sister. The best big sister ever," Layla declared, throwing her arms around Marcus's neck. "I promise to help with everything, Daddy. I can read her stories and sing her songs and teach her all about the alphabet." Marcus hugged her back, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. His mind was already racing with everything they'd need: a crib, diapers, formula. But for now, he just wanted to savor this moment. "Have you thought about what you'll name her?" Dr. Chen asked. Layla pulled back from the hug, her eyes wide. "Oh, can I help pick her name, Daddy? Please?" "We'll talk about it," Marcus promised, though his heart had already settled on a name that felt right. Grace, because that's exactly what she was, a gift of grace when he least expected it. Dr. Chen began explaining the next steps: meetings with social workers, paperwork to fill out, and preparations they'd need to make. But Marcus found it hard to focus on the details. His eyes kept drifting to the window, where the winter sun was breaking through the clouds. 2 days ago, he'd walked into this hospital terrified and uncertain. Now, he was walking out as the father of 2 precious daughters. Layla's voice broke through his thoughts. "This is the best day ever," she declared, beaming up at him. "Way better than any present Santa could bring." Marcus couldn't help but laugh, pulling her close again. "You're right about that, baby girl. You're absolutely right about that." Marcus sat in his worn recliner, cradling Grace as she wailed into the night. The living room clock read 2:37 a.m., and exhaustion weighed heavy on his shoulders. Empty formula bottles and scattered diapers littered the coffee table, evidence of their steep learning curve. "Shh, shh," he whispered, gently bouncing her. "What's wrong, little one? We just changed you and fed you." His voice cracked with fatigue. The baby's cries only grew louder, her tiny face scrunched and red. Layla appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. She wore her favorite unicorn pajamas, her curly hair wrapped carefully in a silk bonnet. "Is Grace okay, Daddy? I'm sorry she woke you, baby girl. You should be sleeping. I want to help." Layla patted across the carpet and reached for her sister. "Maybe she wants to be rocked like they do in movies?" Marcus carefully transferred Grace to the old wooden rocking chair, showing Layla how to support the baby's head. Like this, see? Real gentle. Layla began to rock, humming a tune she'd learned in Sunday school. To Marcus's amazement, Grace's cries started to soften. Look, Daddy, she likes it. Layla beamed with pride. You're a natural, sweetheart. Marcus watched his daughters together, his heart swelling despite his exhaustion. Layla might only be 8, but she had an old soul when it came to caring for others. The night continued in cycles of feeding, changing, and soothing. Marcus fumbled with tiny snaps on onesies and struggled to properly warm bottles. Every time Grace settled, something else would set her off. A wet diaper, hunger, or just the need to be held. These diapers are like puzzles, Marcus muttered, trying to figure out which side was front or back. Layla giggled from her perch on the couch. Daddy, the pictures go in the front. Now you tell me. He chuckled, finally getting the diaper secured. What would I do without my helper? Around dawn, Grace finally fell into a deeper sleep. Marcus laid her in the borrowed bassinet beside his bed, his movements careful and slow. Layla had dozed off on the couch, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. As he carried Layla to her room, she stirred. Can I stay home from school today? To help with Grace? No, baby. You need your education. He tucked her in, kissing her forehead. But I promise you can help plenty when you get home. The morning sun was barely peeking through the curtains when the first knock came. Marcus opened the door to find Miss Dorothy, their elderly neighbor from church, holding several casserole dishes. Brought you some proper food, she announced, bustling past him into the kitchen. Can't take care of a baby on empty stomach. Before Marcus could properly thank her, more visitors arrived. Mrs. Jenkins and Sister Marie came bearing bags of baby clothes. These were my granddaughters. Mrs. Jenkins explained, pulling out tiny pink dresses and soft sleepers. All barely worn. The house slowly filled with warmth and chatter. Women from the church moved through his kitchen with familiar efficiency, storing food in his fridge and organizing the baby supplies. They showed him how to properly swaddle Grace, demonstrated different burping techniques, and shared wisdom earned through generations of motherhood. Now, this here is the best way to test if the bottle's too hot, Miss Dorothy demonstrated, dropping formula on her wrist. Don't you worry about asking for help, Marcus Reed. We're all family here. Sister Marie organized the donated clothes by size, explaining how babies grow faster than weeds in summer. You'll want to keep the newborn sizes close at hand, but don't remove tags from the bigger ones just yet. She'll be growing into them before you know it. Around mid-morning, Pastor Samuel arrived. He stood in the doorway of Marcus's living room, taking in the scene of community in action. Grace was being passed carefully from one experienced grandmother to another, each woman cooing and praising her sweet temperament. The Lord works in mysterious ways, Pastor Samuel said, clasping Marcus's shoulder. But he never gives us more than we can handle, especially when we have family to help bear the load. Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. Pastor, I don't know the first thing about raising a baby girl, and yet here you are, already doing it. Pastor Samuel gestured to the room full of support. Let's pray together, brother. The pastor's deep voice filled the small living room as he prayed for strength, wisdom, and blessing over Marcus and his daughters. The women bowed their heads, adding their own quiet amens to his words. Grace chose that moment to wake, her small cry cutting through the prayer. Instead of the panic he'd felt all night, Marcus now moved with more confidence, guided by the morning's lessons. He lifted her from Mrs. Jenkins' arms, supporting her head just as they'd shown him. Look at you, Miss Dorothy approved, already getting the hang of it. Marcus gazed down at Grace's tiny face, now peaceful in his arms. The morning sun streamed through his windows, warming the room filled with love and support. For the first time since finding her in his truck, the weight of responsibility felt lighter, shared by the village that had gathered to help raise his daughter. Sister Marie began humming an old hymn as she folded baby blankets, and others joined in softly. The sound wrapped around Marcus like a familiar embrace, reminding him of Sunday mornings and fellowship halls, of community and belonging. In this moment, his modest home felt rich with blessings, transformed by the presence of those who had come to share his joy and lighten his load. Grace's tiny hand wrapped around his finger, and Marcus felt a peace settle over him. This was family, not just the precious daughters in his care, but the entire room full of people who had shown up without being asked, ready to walk alongside him on this unexpected journey. Marcus sat in his worn recliner, cradling Grace as she wailed into the night. The living room clock read 2:37 a.m., and exhaustion weighed heavy on his shoulders. Empty formula bottles and scattered diapers littered the coffee table, evidence of their steep learning curve. "Shh, shh," he whispered, gently bouncing her. "What's wrong, little one? We just changed you and fed you." His voice cracked with fatigue. The baby's cries only grew louder, her tiny face scrunched and red. "Daddy?" Layla appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her pink unicorn pajamas were wrinkled, and her braids had come loose. "Is Grace okay?" "She's just fussy, baby girl. Go back to bed, you've got school tomorrow." But Layla patted over in her fuzzy slippers instead. "Let me try, Daddy." She reached for her sister with such determination that Marcus had to smile, despite his exhaustion. "Careful now," he said, helping Layla settle into the corner of the couch. He placed Grace in her arms, supporting the baby's head. To his amazement, Grace's cries began to soften as Layla hummed a lullaby, the same one Marcus used to sing to her. "See?" Layla beamed. She just wanted her big sister. The front door creaked open, and Aunt Thelma bustled in, still wearing her church hat despite the late hour. "I came as soon as I finished leading evening prayer group." She took in the scene, the mess, Marcus's bloodshot eyes, and the two girls on the couch. "Oh, honey, you look like you've been through the wars." "I don't know what I'm doing, Aunt Thelma," Marcus admitted, his voice rough. Between the garage being short-staffed and Grace needing feeding every 2 hours, he gestured helplessly at the chaos around them. Aunt Thelma set down her purse and rolled up her sleeves. "First things first, when's the last time you ate something besides coffee?" She didn't wait for an answer, heading straight to the kitchen. Soon, the smell of grilled cheese and tomato soup filled the small house. "Your mama had the same look when you were born," she called over her shoulder. "Didn't know whether to laugh or cry most days, but the Lord doesn't give us more than we can handle, even if we need a little help handling it." Marcus watched Layla with Grace, amazed at how natural they looked together. "I just don't want to mess this up. Layla deserves better than a daddy who's always tired and stretched thin. And now Grace." "Stop right there," Aunt Thelma returned with a steaming bowl and plate. "You're already giving these girls what matters most, love. The rest we'll figure out together." She settled into her favorite chair, her eyes soft but determined. "Now, eat that soup before it gets cold." The next morning came too soon. Marcus helped Layla pack her backpack while trying to warm Grace's bottle with one hand. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but determination set his jaw. "Lunch money's in the front pocket," he reminded Layla. "And don't forget, piano practice after school." "I know, Daddy." She kissed Grace's forehead before heading to the door where the neighbor waited to walk her to school. The garage had been understanding about him taking a few days off, but bills didn't pay themselves. Marcus had just finished dressing Grace in a donated onesie when a sharp knock echoed through the house. A woman in a crisp blazer stood on his porch, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. "Mr. Reed? I'm Sandra Wilson from Child Protective Services." She held up her badge. "May I come in?" Marcus's heart dropped, but he forced a smile. "Of course. Please excuse the mess. We're still adjusting." Sandra's heels clicked on the hardwood as she surveyed the living room. Her eyes lingered on the makeshift changing station, the stack of parenting books from the library, the calendar on the wall already marked with Grace's feeding schedule. "Mr. Reed, I'll be direct. We have concerns about the circumstances surrounding Grace's arrival." She pulled out the note, the one that had been tucked in Grace's blanket. "This suggests the mother may have been in danger. We need to ensure the child's safety." "She is safe," Marcus said firmly, holding Grace closer. "The DNA test proved she's mine. I'm her father. Biology isn't always enough." Sandra's voice was professional, but held a note of sympathy. We need to investigate the mother's situation. Until we can be certain there's no risk to Grace, custody arrangements may need to be temporary. The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Temporary? His voice cracked. Ma'am, she's my daughter. Both my daughters need stability, not uncertainty. I understand this is difficult, Sandra said, making notes in her portfolio. But our priority has to be Grace's safety. If her mother was fleeing something dangerous enough to abandon her newborn, she let the implications hang in the air. Marcus sank into his chair, Grace sleeping peacefully against his chest, unaware that her world might be about to change again. What do you need from me? For now, we'll conduct a home study. I'll need references, employers, neighbors, character witnesses, and we'll need to discuss your support system, financial stability. She continued listing requirements, but Marcus could barely hear over the roaring in his ears. The social worker's words faded into a blur of procedures and potential hearings. All he could focus on was Grace's warmth against his heart, the soft puff of her breath, the tiny hand curled around his finger. The thought of losing her made his chest tight with fear. Mr. Reed? Sandra's voice cut through his thoughts. Do you understand what I've explained? Marcus looked up, meeting her eyes with quiet determination. Yes, ma'am. But you need to understand something too. That little girl sleeping in my arms? She's not temporary to me. She's my daughter, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe and loved. Sandra's expression softened slightly, but her words remained firm. I hope you can, but for now consider this a warning. We'll be watching closely. She stood, straightening her blazer. Expect my call to schedule the home study. The click of the front door closing echoed through the suddenly silent house. Marcus sat motionless, holding Grace, his mind racing with all the ways his world could shatter. The note that had brought him such joy just days ago now cast a shadow over their future. The fight for his daughter had only begun, and he had no idea how to win it. Marcus woke to Grace's soft whimpers through the baby monitor at 5:15 a.m. His muscles ached from the awkward positions he'd fallen asleep in during late-night feedings, but he pushed himself up anyway. The wooden floor creaked beneath his feet as he made his way to the nursery, really just a corner of his bedroom where they'd set up a borrowed crib. Good morning, sweet girl, he whispered, lifting Grace from her crib. Her tiny fingers curled around his thumb as he cradled her. The gesture made his heart swell every time. He settled into the rocking chair, testing the bottle's temperature against his wrist before offering it to her. Grace latched on eagerly, her dark eyes fixed on his face. You're getting good at this, aren't you? Marcus smiled down at her. Just a week ago, he'd been fumbling with bottles and diapers, terrified he'd do something wrong. Now, their early morning routine felt almost natural. The sun hadn't risen yet when he placed Grace back in her crib, sound asleep. He tiptoed to the kitchen, careful not to wake Layla. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator as he pulled out sandwich ingredients. Marcus spread peanut butter on wheat bread, remembering how Layla liked the crusts cut off. He'd been making her school lunches for years, but now he worked with new purpose, determined to keep both his girls' lives as normal as possible, despite the chaos of the past week. Turkey and cheese, or PB&J today, baby girl, he muttered to himself, then chuckled. He was already talking to himself more, a sign of sleep deprivation or maybe just fatherhood times two. He packed apple slices, carrot sticks, and a small cookie into the pink lunchbox. A note went in last. Have a great day, love, Daddy. These little routines anchored him when everything else felt like it was spinning too fast. The coffee maker gurgled to life just as soft footsteps padded down the hallway. Layla appeared, already dressed in her school uniform, though her hair needed attention. Morning, Daddy, she yawned, climbing onto a kitchen stool. Morning, sunshine. Marcus set a bowl of cereal in front of her. Sleep okay? Mm-hmm. She spooned Cheerios into her mouth. Grace only woke me up twice. Marcus's heart squeezed. He hadn't realized the baby's crying was disturbing Layla's sleep. I'm sorry about that, baby. Maybe we can move her crib. It's okay, Layla interrupted, surprising him with her maturity. She's just a baby. She needs us. Marcus stepped behind her chair, beginning to part and braid her hair. His fingers had learned this dance years ago, though some mornings were neater than others. You're being such a good big sister. I like having a sister, Layla said between bites, even if she's super tiny and can't play yet. She'll grow, Marcus assured her, securing the second braid with a hair tie. Before you know it, she'll be running around after you. The baby monitor crackled with Grace's fussy sounds. Marcus glanced at the clock, 6:45 a.m. His aunt would arrive soon to watch Grace while he drove Layla to school and headed to work. Can I help you get her ready? Layla asked, pushing her empty bowl away. Let's check your backpack first. Got your homework? Layla nodded, pulling out folders to show him. Marcus marveled at how she'd stepped up this past week, becoming more responsible without him having to ask. She'd even started laying out her clothes the night before. Grace's cries grew more insistent. They found her squirming in her crib, little legs kicking at her blanket. Layla reached in to stroke her cheek while Marcus changed her diaper with practiced movements. Remember when you couldn't do that fast? Layla giggled. Hey now. Marcus pretended to be offended. I'm a quick learner. Learner. Levin.com. Tended. 10. 10. 10. The truth was, he'd watched countless online videos late at night, determined to master every aspect of newborn care. His hands had trembled the first time he'd bathed Grace, terrified of hurting her. Now, 1 week in, he moved with more confidence, though the weight of responsibility still pressed heavy on his shoulders. The doorbell chimed, his aunt right on time. Marcus hurried to let her in. Grace nestled in one arm while Layla grabbed her backpack. There's my girls, Aunt Ruby cooed, immediately reaching for the baby. Her presence brought instant calm to the morning chaos. Go on now, you two. We'll be just fine here. Marcus checked Grace's diaper bag one last time, making sure his aunt had everything she needed. I pumped some extra formula last night. It's in the fridge. And there's Marcus James Reed. His aunt cut him off with a knowing smile. This ain't my first rodeo. Go on, get my big girl to school. The drive to school was quiet. Layla watching houses pass by while Marcus's mind raced through his mental checklist. Work would be busy today. 3 oil changes and a transmission repair waiting. He'd have to work through lunch to make it home on time. Daddy? Layla's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Yes, baby? Are you scared? The question caught him off guard. He glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting her concerned eyes. What makes you ask that? Sometimes you look worried when you think I'm not watching. She twisted her backpack strap between her fingers. Like when you're feeding Grace or checking your phone. Marcus slowed the truck, pulling into the school parking lot. He turned to face his daughter, amazed by her perception. I guess I am a little scared sometimes, he admitted. Being a daddy is a big job, and now I've got 2 of you to take care of. But you're doing good, Layla assured him. Grace is always clean and fed, and you still help me with my homework. Thank you, baby. He reached back to squeeze her knee. That means a lot. They walked hand in hand to her classroom, Marcus carrying her lunchbox like always. Outside the door, he knelt to hug her goodbye. Have a great day at school, okay? Aunt Ruby will pick you up. Okay. Layla hugged him tight, then pulled back with a serious expression. Daddy? Yes? God send us Grace, she whispered, her eyes bright with certainty. Marcus smiled faintly, though worry lingered behind his eyes. Get to class, baby girl. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of New Hope Baptist Church, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Marcus sat in his usual spot, 3rd row from the front, right side, with Grace nestled in a baby carrier against his chest and Layla sitting perfectly straight beside him in her Sunday best. The familiar scent of old hymnals and lemon polish filled the air as the congregation filed in. Mrs. Thompson, her gray hair perfectly coiffed, stopped to peek at Grace sleeping peacefully in her carrier. Oh, Marcus, she's just precious, she whispered, patting his shoulder. Pastor Samuel stood at the pulpit, his warm smile spreading across his face as he observed the growing crowd. The morning light caught the silver in his hair, giving him an almost ethereal glow. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his rich voice carrying to every corner of the sanctuary, "today we have a special blessing in our midst." Marcus felt his chest tighten as the pastor gestured for him to come forward. Layla practically bounced out of her seat, eager to join him. Together, they made their way to the front, Grace still sleeping soundly against Marcus's chest. "Many of you have already heard about the miracle that happened on New Year's Eve," Pastor Samuel continued, placing a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. "But today, we officially welcome the newest member of our church family, little Grace Reed." A murmur of appreciation rippled through the congregation. Mrs. Jackson, who had brought over a casserole just days ago, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Marcus could see Brother Williams nodding approvingly from his seat in the back, his wife beaming beside him. "Layla," Pastor Samuel said, "would you like to tell everyone how it feels to be a big sister?" Layla stepped forward, her braids swinging with confidence. "It's the best thing ever," she declared into the microphone that seemed almost too big for her small frame. "Grace is God's special gift to us, and I'm going to help Daddy take really good care of her." Several amens echoed through the church. Marcus felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes as he watched his older daughter speak with such certainty and love. Pastor Samuel turned to address the congregation. In Isaiah 43:19, the Lord says, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?" His voice grew stronger as he continued. Sometimes God's blessings come in unexpected packages, at unexpected times, in unexpected ways. Marcus looked down at Grace, who had begun to stir. Her tiny fingers flexed against his shirt, and her eyes blinked open, revealing those deep brown eyes that had captured his heart from the first moment. "Look at this family before us," Pastor Samuel gestured. "Marcus Reed has been a pillar of our community, raising Layla with faith and dedication as a single father. Now God has seen fit to bless him with another daughter. Some might see this as a burden, another mouth to feed, another child to raise alone, but Marcus saw it for what it was, a divine appointment." The pastor's words resonated through the sanctuary, and Marcus could feel the support of his church family wrapping around him like a warm blanket. Sister Mary, who had taught Sunday school for 30 years, was openly weeping now. "And look at how our church family has responded," Pastor Samuel continued, his voice filled with pride. "You've brought meals, donated clothes and supplies, offered babysitting. This is what it means to be the body of Christ." Layla reached up and took Marcus's free hand, squeezing it tight. He squeezed back, grateful for her strength and understanding that went far beyond her 8 years. "Brothers and sisters, let us pray for the Reed family," Pastor Samuel said, extending his hands. The congregation rose as one, many reaching out toward Marcus and his daughters. "Lord, we thank you for this precious gift of life. We thank you for choosing our brother Marcus to be Grace's father. We ask for your continued blessing and protection over this family." As the prayer continued, Marcus felt something shift inside him. The weight of responsibility he'd been carrying seemed lighter somehow, shared by the dozens of people surrounding him with their love and prayers. Grace cooed softly against his chest, and Layla leaned into his side. After the service, people crowded around them in the fellowship hall. Sister Jenkins pressed an envelope into his hand, whispering that it was from the church's Family Assistance Fund. Brother Thompson offered to help set up a proper nursery. Miss Angela, who ran the church's children's ministry, already had a schedule drawn up for meals to be delivered for the next month. "Marcus," Mrs. Robinson said, her arthritis-bent fingers gentle as she touched Grace's cheek, "you just let us know what you need. We're all here for you." The fellowship hall buzzed with conversation and laughter. Children darted between the adults, paper plates of cookies in hand. Layla proudly showed off her baby sister to her Sunday school friends, explaining how to properly hold a bottle and the importance of supporting Grace's head. Marcus watched it all, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Pastor Samuel appeared at his side, a knowing smile on his face. "God doesn't give us more than we can handle," the pastor said softly, "especially when he surrounds us with family like this." Grace stirred against Marcus's chest, making those little snuffling sounds that he'd already learned meant she was getting hungry. As if by magic, Sister Wilson appeared with a warm bottle, prepared exactly the way he'd shown her last week. "Here you go, Brother Reed," she said with a warm smile. "Can't have our littlest member going hungry during fellowship, can we?" Marcus settled into a nearby chair, cradling Grace as she eagerly took the bottle. Layla perched on the armrest, one hand resting protectively on her sister's blanket. All around them, the congregation continued their Sunday fellowship, but Marcus could feel their love and support enveloping his little family like a protective shield. For the first time since that cold New Year's Eve night, Marcus felt truly at peace. The path ahead might not be easy, but he wasn't walking it alone. God had not only blessed him with another daughter, but had reminded him of the strength found in community and faith. The day had been long at the garage, and Marcus's muscles ached from hunching over engines. It was nearly 9 o'clock when he finally settled into his favorite armchair, Grace dozing in his arms after her evening bottle. Layla had already gone to bed, leaving the house wrapped in that special kind of quiet that only comes with sleeping children. He gazed down at Grace's peaceful face, marveling at how something so small could fill his heart so completely. Her tiny fingers curled around his thumb as she slept, and he couldn't help but smile. The soft glow of the table lamp cast warm shadows across her features, highlighting those eyes that had first made his heart skip a beat, eyes that reminded him so much of someone from his past. As he shifted Grace to lay her in her bassinet, something crinkled against his arm. Frowning, he carefully adjusted her blanket, the one she'd been wrapped in when he found her. There, tucked into a loose seam he hadn't noticed before, was an envelope, worn thin from being hidden. Marcus's heart began to pound. With trembling fingers, he gently extracted the envelope, taking care not to wake Grace. The paper was creased and soft, as if it had been handled many times before being hidden away. He glanced at his sleeping daughter, then back at the envelope in his hands. For a moment he just sat there, staring at it. Part of him wanted to leave it unopened, to protect the fragile peace he'd found these past few days, but he knew he couldn't. Whatever was inside might help him understand and protect his daughter better. Taking a deep breath, he carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in hurried handwriting. The words seemed to have been written in haste, some letters smudged as if tears had fallen on them. "Dear Marcus," the letter began. His throat tightened as he recognized the handwriting. "By now, you've found our daughter. I'm sorry for leaving her this way, but I had no choice. You're the only one I can trust to keep her safe." Marcus had to pause, his vision blurring. He blinked hard and continued reading. "I made some mistakes, got involved with dangerous people. I thought I could handle it, but things went wrong. So wrong. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I had to protect our baby at any cost. These people, they're powerful, Marcus. They have connections everywhere. If they find her, she won't survive." His hands began to shake. He looked over at Grace, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept. The sight of her, so innocent and vulnerable, made his heart clench. "I've been careful," the letter continued. "I made sure no one knew about the pregnancy. I hid for months, waiting until she was born. I watched you from afar, saw how you raised Layla with such love and strength. I knew you were the only one who could give Grace the life she deserves." Marcus closed his eyes, remembering the woman he'd once loved. They'd been so young then, with dreams that seemed possible. But she'd disappeared without a word, leaving him to raise Layla alone. Now, years later, her words painted a picture of desperation and fear he couldn't ignore. "I named her Grace because that's what she is, God's grace in human form. Please don't try to find me. It's safer this way. Just know that leaving her with you was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the only choice I had. Love her enough for both of us." The letter ended with a hastily scrawled signature, but Marcus barely saw it through his tears. He looked at Grace again, his precious daughter sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing around her existence. Rising quietly from his chair, Marcus walked over to the bassinet. He reached down and touched Grace's cheek, so soft and warm under his fingertips. Her little nose twitched at his touch, but she didn't wake. In the dim light, she looked like any other baby. Perfect, innocent, untouched by the darkness her mother's letter had revealed. Marcus sank to his knees beside the bassinet, one hand still resting protectively near his daughter. The weight of this new knowledge pressed down on him like a physical thing. All his worries about diapers and formula suddenly seemed trivial compared to this nameless threat hanging over his baby girl. "I've got you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Nobody's going to hurt you, Grace. Nobody." The promise felt heavy on his tongue, but he meant every word. He'd already lost so much. He wouldn't lose her too. Grace stirred in her sleep, making those tiny baby sounds that had already become music to his ears. Marcus stayed there, watching her, the letter clutched in his other hand. Everything made more sense now, the social worker's concerns, the hints of danger in the first note, but understanding didn't make it easier. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time in this quiet moment between father and daughter. Outside, a car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating the room before leaving them in soft darkness again. Marcus remained still, his mind racing with all the implications of what he'd just learned. He thought about his job at the garage, his small house, his ordinary life. None of it seemed enough now, not with this shadow looming over them. But then he remembered what the letter had said about how he'd raised Layla, about his strength and love. Maybe that was exactly what Grace needed most, not wealth or power, but a father who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe. Grace's tiny hand flexed in her sleep, reaching out as if seeking reassurance. Marcus gently caught it with his finger, letting her grip hold him there. In that touch, he felt the weight of his promise settle into his bones. Whatever was coming, whatever threats lurked in the shadows of her mother's past, they would have to go through him first. The April morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through Marcus's bedroom window. He stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie with careful precision. This wasn't just any Sunday, it was Easter, and more importantly, it was Grace's dedication day. "Daddy, is my dress okay?" Layla twirled in the doorway, her yellow Easter dress floating around her like petals of a spring flower. Her hair was done up in neat braids, tied with matching yellow ribbons. "You look beautiful, baby girl," Marcus said, his heart swelling with pride. He turned to where Grace lay on his bed, surrounded by pillows. At 4 months old, she had grown into a happy, healthy baby with bright eyes and an infectious smile. Today she wore a white christening gown that Mrs. Johnson from the church had lovingly restored, the same one her daughters and granddaughters had worn. Marcus lifted Grace, cradling her close. The soft fabric of her gown brushed against his Sunday best as she cooed and reached for his face. "Ready for your big day, little one?" The drive to church was filled with Layla's excited chatter about the Easter egg hunt planned for after service. Marcus listened, occasionally catching Grace's eye in the rearview mirror. She watched the world go by from her car seat, content and secure. First Baptist Church stood proud against the morning sky, its white steeple reaching toward heaven. The parking lot was fuller than usual. Easter Sunday always brought out the whole congregation. As Marcus helped Layla out of the car and gathered Grace in his arms, familiar faces greeted them with warm smiles. "There's our special girl," Mrs. Thompson, who had been bringing them casseroles since Grace arrived, hurried over to peek at the baby. "Oh, Marcus, she looks like an angel in that gown." Inside, the sanctuary was transformed for Easter. White lilies adorned the altar, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Marcus led his daughters to their usual spot in the third row, where his aunt already waited. "Come here, sweet pea," Aunt Ruby whispered, taking Grace while Marcus got settled. The baby went willingly, familiar with her great-aunt's loving arms. The service began with joyful hymns of resurrection and hope. Marcus sang along, one arm around Layla as she swayed to the music. Grace, back in his arms, seemed to respond to the melody, her little legs kicking in time. When Pastor Johnson called for the dedication families to come forward, Marcus's heart beat a little faster. He stood, Grace secure in his arms, and Layla holding his free hand. They weren't the only family dedicating a child that day. The Wilsons were there with their twins, and young Sarah Martinez carried her son. But Marcus felt as though time slowed down as they walked to the front. The congregation's familiar faces looked back at them with love and support. There was Mr. Henderson, who had helped Marcus find a better-paying position at the garage. Miss Clara, who watched Layla after school some days. The Williams family, who had shown up with a trunk full of baby supplies that first week. Each face represented a thread in the tapestry of support that had wrapped around his family. Pastor Johnson's voice carried clearly through the sanctuary. Brothers and sisters, we gather today to dedicate these precious children to the Lord. Each one is a gift, a reminder of God's grace and the miracle of new life. He turned to Marcus first. Brother Marcus, you stand before God and this congregation with your daughter Grace. Do you commit to raising her in the knowledge and love of the Lord? Marcus's voice was steady and clear. I do. Do you promise to guide her in faith, to teach her God's word, and to show her his love through your own actions? I do. Marcus felt Layla squeeze his hand. And do you, the congregation of First Baptist, commit to supporting this family, to helping nurture Grace's faith, and to being Christ's hands and feet in their lives? The response was immediate and strong. We do. Pastor Johnson placed a gentle hand on Grace's head. Grace Reed, we dedicate you to the Lord this Easter morning. May he watch over you, protect you, and guide your steps all the days of your life. He turned to the congregation. Let us pray for Grace and all our dedication families. As the pastor prayed, Marcus looked down at his daughter. Grace was awake and calm, her eyes fixed on the colorful windows above. Layla stood straight and proud beside them, every inch the devoted big sister. In that moment, Marcus felt a peace he hadn't known in years. The prayer ended, and Pastor Johnson's voice rang out with joy. Church, help me welcome these little ones into our family of faith. The sanctuary erupted in applause. Some people stood, others called out, Amen, and praise the Lord. Grace startled at the noise, then broke into a gummy smile that set off a wave of delighted laughter. The families returned to their seats, but Marcus felt as though he was floating. Aunt Ruby dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, and Layla couldn't stop grinning. Even Grace seemed to sense the significance of the moment, settling contentedly against her father's chest. The rest of the service passed in a blur of Easter hymns and celebration. When it ended, people streamed forward to congratulate them. Mrs. Thompson hugged Marcus tight. Your mama would be so proud of the father you've become, she whispered, making his eyes mist over. Looking around at the faces of his church family, black and white, young and old, all bound together by love and faith, Marcus felt something settle in his soul. This was what family looked like. This was what hope felt like. Years of struggling as a single father, of wondering if he was enough, seemed to fade away in the light of this perfect moment. Grace was his daughter, declared before God and his community. Layla was thriving as a big sister, and he, Marcus Reed, stood in the house of God, surrounded by more love and support than he'd ever dreamed possible. The sunlight streamed through the stained glass, blessing them all in its rainbow glow, and Marcus knew with certainty that this was exactly where they were meant to be. The evening settled softly around the Reed household, the last traces of Easter Sunday fading into night. Marcus hummed an old hymn as he cleaned up the remains of their celebratory dinner, paper plates with traces of ham and sweet potato pie, plastic cups still sticky with fruit punch. The day's joy lingered in the air like the scent of the Easter lilies someone had brought them. Time for bed, girls, Marcus called out, watching Layla play with her baby sister on the living room floor. Grace, now almost 4 months old, lay on her blanket, cooing and reaching for the stuffed bunny Layla dangled above her. 5 more minutes, Daddy, please? Layla pleaded, her eyes bright with the special connection she'd developed with Grace. She likes when I make Mr. Hoppy dance. Marcus smiled, his heart warming at the sight. Not tonight, baby. It's been a big day, and you've got school tomorrow." Layla sighed, but didn't argue. She'd grown more responsible since Grace's arrival, understanding when it was time to listen. Marcus scooped Grace up, cradling her against his chest while Layla gathered Mr. Hoppy in Grace's blanket. In Grace's nursery, formerly his home office, Marcus changed her into fresh pajamas decorated with tiny angels. The room had transformed over the past months, church members helping paint the walls a soft yellow and bringing furniture piece by piece. A handmade quilt from Miss Betty draped over the crib rail, and a mobile of stars hung above, spinning gently in the breeze from the small fan. "Dear Lord," Marcus prayed softly as he laid Grace in her crib, "thank you for this precious gift. Help me be the father she needs." Grace's eyes, so like her mother's, blinked heavily as sleep began to claim her. Next door in Layla's room, Marcus tucked his older daughter into bed, smoothing her covers just the way she liked. "Did you have a good Easter?" he asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "The best," Layla yawned, clutching her worn teddy bear. "I loved when Pastor Jim blessed Grace. And did you see how many people came to hug us after?" "I sure did." Marcus brushed a kiss across her forehead. "Our church family loves us very much." "Daddy," Layla's voice grew serious. "Is Grace going to stay with us forever?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "Of course she is, baby. Why do you ask?" "I heard Mrs. Thompson talking to Miss Betty about some people looking for her." Layla's bottom lip trembled slightly. "I don't want anyone to take my sister away." Marcus's chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Nobody's going to take Grace away. She's right where she belongs, with her family. Now close those eyes and get some sleep. Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, baby girl." Marcus left Layla's door cracked just how she liked it and walked down the hallway, pausing to check on Grace once more. She slept peacefully, one tiny fist curled near her face. The sight of her still amazed him sometimes, this unexpected blessing that had changed their lives so completely. In the kitchen, he finished loading the dishwasher and wiped down the counters, his movements automatic after years of keeping house on his own. The quiet of the evening wrapped around him like a familiar blanket. Through the window above the sink, he could see the moon rising, nearly full and casting silver light across his small backyard. The sharp knock at the front door shattered the peace. Marcus froze, dish towel still in hand. It was past 9, too late for casual visitors, especially on a holiday. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Setting down the towel, Marcus moved cautiously toward the door. Through the peephole, he could make out 3 figures on his porch, their shapes dark against the porch light he'd left on. They wore expensive-looking clothes, and one held what appeared to be a briefcase. Marcus's hand hesitated on the doorknob. Something about this felt wrong, felt dangerous. But he was a man of faith, and he'd faced his share of challenges before. With a quick prayer for strength, he opened the door. 2 men and a woman stood before him. The woman, perhaps in her 50s, wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, even at this hour. Beside her, a younger man shared her sharp features and air of authority. The third person, holding the briefcase, had the unmistakable bearing of a lawyer. "Mr. Reed," the woman's voice was clipped, professional. "I'm Victoria Whitman. This is my son, James, and our attorney, Mr. Patterson. We need to discuss Grace." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. His fingers tightened on the doorframe as understanding dawned. These people were from Grace's mother's family. The wealthy relatives he'd never known existed. "It's rather late," Marcus managed to say, fighting to keep his voice steady. "My daughters are asleep." "Our granddaughter," Victoria corrected sharply, "should never have been left with you. We've spent months tracking her down." The younger man, James, stepped forward. "We're here to take custody of Grace. You're clearly unfit to raise her. A single father, working class, living in." He glanced dismissively at Marcus's modest home. "These conditions." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Reed, we have papers prepared. We can do this the easy way, or we can take it to court. But I assure you, with the resources at our disposal, there's only one way this ends." Marcus felt the world tilting beneath his feet. All the joy of the day, the peace he'd found, the family he'd built, it all threatened to crumble in the face of these strangers who looked at him with such cold certainty. "She's my daughter," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "She's our blood," Victoria countered, "and we'll ensure she has every advantage in life, advantages you could never provide." The words struck deep, playing on every doubt Marcus had ever harbored. But then he thought of Grace's smile, of Layla reading stories to her baby sister, of their church family surrounding them with love. He thought of the note, "If they find her, she won't survive." Ice spread through his veins as he looked at these powerful people who thought they could simply walk in and tear his family apart. These were the people Grace's mother had feared. He was sure of it now. The fluorescent lights of courtroom B cast harsh shadows across Marcus's face as he sat rigidly in the wooden chair, his Sunday suit feeling too tight around his neck. The smell of lemon polish and old books filled the air. His hands, usually steady from years of mechanical work, trembled slightly as he cradled Grace against his chest. Across the aisle, Grace's maternal relatives sat with perfect posture, their designer clothes and confident expressions, a stark contrast to Marcus's worn suit and worried face. Their lawyer, Mr. Patterson, stood at the podium, his voice cutting through the quiet courtroom. "Your Honor," Patterson began, adjusting his gold cufflinks. "While Mr. Reed may have biological ties to the child, he lacks the fundamental resources to provide her with the life she deserves. The Prescott family can offer Grace private schools, summer homes, and opportunities Mr. Reed simply cannot match." Marcus felt each word like a physical blow. He looked down at Grace, peaceful in his arms, her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb. Beside him, his court-appointed lawyer, Miss Thompson, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Mrs. Prescott, Grace's maternal grandmother, took the stand next. Her pearl necklace caught the light as she spoke. "We have a nursery already prepared in our home. The best pediatricians in the state are on speed dial. Our family has generations of stability, Your Honor. What can a mechanic offer compared to that?" Marcus wanted to stand up, to shout about the love in his home, about Layla's straight-A report cards despite their modest means, about the community that had embraced them. But he remained silent, remembering Miss Thompson's advice to let the process work. "Mr. Reed," Judge Collins called, her stern voice echoing, "please approach with the child." Marcus's legs felt like lead as he walked forward. Grace stirred in his arms, making those little cooing sounds that usually brought him joy. Now they made his heart ache with fear. "Your Honor," Miss Thompson spoke up, "Mr. Reed has provided a stable home for his older daughter for 8 years. His church community has rallied around him, providing support, and—" "The church can't provide college tuition," Mr. Patterson interrupted. "They can't ensure this child's future the way the Prescotts can." Judge Collins raised her hand for silence. She peered over her glasses at Grace, then at Marcus, then at the Prescotts. "This is a complex situation that requires careful consideration. Given the circumstances surrounding the child's arrival and the questions raised about potential dangers mentioned in the mother's note, the court must err on the side of caution." Marcus's throat tightened. He held Grace closer, breathing in her sweet baby smell, feeling her warmth against his chest. "Until a full investigation and review can be completed," Judge Collins continued, her voice heavy with authority, "I am ordering temporary custody of Grace Reed to be placed with the Department of Children's Services." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Please," he whispered, but the word caught in his throat. A social worker approached, her face professionally neutral but her eyes kind. "Mr. Reed, I need you to hand me the baby now." Marcus looked at Grace's peaceful face, her dark eyes now open and looking up at him trustingly. His vision blurred with tears as he pressed one last kiss to her forehead. "Daddy loves you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Daddy loves you so much." The social worker reached out, and with trembling hands, Marcus transferred his daughter into her arms. Grace began to fuss, her little face scrunching up as if she knew something was wrong. The sound of her cries echoed off the courtroom walls as the social worker walked away. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, his empty arms aching. Through tear-filled eyes, he watched as Grace disappeared through the courtroom doors. The Prescotts gathered their things, speaking in low voices with their lawyer. Their faces showed satisfaction, but Marcus barely registered them anymore. Miss Thompson spoke quietly beside him, something about appeals and next steps, but her words seemed to come from far away. All Marcus could hear was the lingering echo of Grace's cries and the thundering of his own heartbeat. The courtroom slowly emptied, but Marcus remained, staring at the doors where Grace had disappeared. His Sunday suit, pressed so carefully that morning with hope and prayer, now felt like a costume in a cruel play. The empty space in his arms felt like a physical wound. "Mr. Reed," the bailiff said gently, "the courtroom needs to be cleared." Marcus nodded numbly, his feet somehow carrying him toward the exit. Each step away from where he'd last held Grace felt like a betrayal. In the hallway, the harsh fluorescent lights illuminated his tears as reality settled over him like a heavy blanket. His baby girl was gone. He thought of Layla at school, excited to come home and play with her sister. How would he explain this to her? The thought brought fresh tears to his eyes. His aunt was waiting outside with their church friends, ready to either celebrate or console. Now he would have to face them with empty arms and a broken heart. Marcus leaned against the cold marble wall of the courthouse, his legs barely holding him up. The paper with the next court date felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in his pocket. Somewhere in this same building, Grace was being processed into the system, her cries probably still echoing in strange arms. "Lord," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion, "help me be strong enough for this fight." But for now, in this moment, he let himself feel the full weight of his loss, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs in the empty courthouse hallway. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the crushing silence of the Reed home. Marcus sat slumped at the worn oak table, his large hands covering his face. The empty baby bottle still sat in the dish rack, unused since yesterday when they'd taken Grace away. Her absence felt like a physical weight pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting patterns on the cheap linoleum floor. The same floor where just days ago he danced with Grace in his arms, swaying to old gospel songs while Layla giggled and clapped along. Now the house felt hollow, like someone had scooped out its heart. The social worker's words echoed in his mind. Temporary custody is in the best interest of the child. Best interest, as if love counted for nothing against bank accounts and fancy lawyers. His shoulders shook as he fought back tears. From the living room came the soft padding of small feet. Layla appeared in the doorway, still in her pink pajamas covered with unicorns, her hair wrapped neatly in the silk scarf he'd learned to tie for her. She watched her father with eyes too old for her 8 years. "Daddy?" Her voice was small but steady. "Can I make you some toast?" Marcus lifted his head, trying to force a smile for his daughter's sake. "No thank you, baby. I'm not hungry right now." Layla crossed the kitchen anyway, pulling out a chair next to him. The legs scraped against the floor with a harsh sound that made Marcus wince. She climbed up and sat, folding her hands on the table, just like she'd seen grown-ups do. "You didn't eat dinner last night either," she said, matter-of-factly. "And you always tell me breakfast is the most important meal of the day." Despite everything, a tiny, genuine smile tugged at Marcus's lips. "When did you get so grown?" "I'm the big sister now," Layla said proudly. Then her face fell slightly. "At least, I still am, right? Even if Grace isn't here right now?" Marcus's heart clenched. He reached over and took his daughter's small hand in his. "Of course you are, baby. Grace is still your sister. She's still our family." "Then we have to get her back," Layla said with the simple certainty of a child. She hopped down from her chair and went to the refrigerator, where Grace's first photo was held by a magnet. It showed her sleeping peacefully in Marcus's arms at the hospital, Layla beaming beside them. "Look how happy we were," Layla said, bringing the photo to the table. "And remember what Pastor Jones said at the dedication? That God brought Grace to us for a reason?" Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat as he looked at the picture. Grace had been so tiny, so perfect. How could anyone think he wasn't good enough to be her father? And you always say that everything happens for a reason, Layla continued, climbing back into her chair. That God has a plan, even when we don't understand it. She reached out and patted his arm with her small hand. The gentle touch nearly undid him. Here was his baby girl, trying to comfort him when he should be strong for her. I miss her too, Daddy, Layla whispered. But you taught me that God never gives us more than we can handle. Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her. Past the childhood innocence, he saw wisdom and faith shining in her eyes. His own words coming back to him through her pure belief struck him like a physical blow. She was right. He'd always taught her to trust in God's plan, to have faith even in the darkest times. How could he do any less now? Layla got up and wrapped her arms around his neck, hugging him tight. We're still a family, Daddy. And families don't give up on each other. Marcus hugged her back, breathing in the familiar scent of her coconut hair oil, his baby girl, his rock. When had she become so strong? Grace needs us to fight for her, Layla said into his shoulder. Like in the Bible story you read me, about how Moses' mama fought to keep him safe. Marcus pulled back slightly, looking into his daughter's earnest face. You remember that story? Layla nodded eagerly. His mama put him in a basket to save him, and God made sure he was found by someone who could protect him until it was safe for him to go back to his real family. Fresh tears pricked Marcus's eyes, but these weren't tears of despair. His daughter's simple faith was like a light cutting through the darkness of his fear and doubt. Grace's mama put her somewhere safe too, Layla continued. She put her with us, and now we have to show everyone that we're her real family. Marcus drew a deep, shaky breath. The crushing weight on his chest began to lift slightly. He looked at the photo again, at his daughters, at the joy on their faces. That joy wasn't gone. It was just waiting to be restored. When did you get so smart? He asked softly, smoothing a hand over Layla's wrapped hair. She gave him a bright smile. I learned it from you, Daddy. You always say that God never gives us more than we can handle. The evening sun cast long shadows across the church steps as Marcus trudged toward the weathered wooden doors. His work clothes were wrinkled from a long day at the garage, grease still staining his calloused hands. Each step felt heavy, like his work boots were filled with lead. Pastor Samuel stood in the doorway, his kind eyes crinkling with concern as he watched Marcus approach. Brother Marcus, he said softly, extending his hand. I've been praying for you. Marcus tried to speak, but his throat tightened. Instead, he simply nodded, accepting the pastor's firm handshake. Inside the church, the familiar scent of old hymnals and wood polish wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. They settled into the pastor's modest office, where a desk lamp cast a warm glow over family photos and well-worn Bible commentaries. Marcus sank into the cushioned chair, his shoulders sagging under invisible weight. Tell me everything, son, Pastor Samuel said, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. The words spilled out like water from a broken dam. Marcus described the relatives who'd appeared at his door, their expensive suits and cold eyes. He explained how they'd wielded their wealth like a weapon, questioning his ability to provide for Grace. His voice cracked when he described watching social services drive away with his baby girl. They said, I'm not fit to be her father, Marcus whispered, staring at his hands. Maybe they're right. I can barely afford our little house. I work so many hours just to make ends meet. Pastor Samuel's chair creaked as he stood and walked around his desk. Now, you listen to me, Marcus Reed, he said firmly. Being a father isn't measured by the size of your wallet, it's measured by the size of your heart. The pastor reached for his phone. Miss Beverly, he spoke into the receiver, I need you to start making some calls. Emergency church meeting tonight at 7. Within 2 hours, the sanctuary hummed with activity. Familiar faces filled the pews, mechanics from Marcus's shop, teachers from Layla's school, elderly ladies who'd helped with Grace, and dozens more from the congregation. Pastor Samuel stood at the pulpit, his voice carrying authority. Brothers and sisters, one of our own needs us. Marcus Reed has been a faithful member of this church for 15 years. Now it's our turn to be faithful to him. Mrs. Johnson, who lived next door to Marcus, was the first to stand. "I've watched that man shovel snow from my driveway every winter without being asked," she declared. "When my car wouldn't start, he fixed it for free. That's the kind of man he island." Mr. Thompson, Layla's Sunday school teacher, rose next. "I see how Marcus brings Layla to church every Sunday, rain or shine. That girl knows more Bible verses than most adults because her daddy teaches her at home." One by one, people stood to speak. The mechanic shop owner praised Marcus's work ethic. A young mother described how Marcus had changed her flat tire during a thunderstorm. The church treasurer spoke of his faithful tithing, even in lean times. "We're going to need money for lawyers," Pastor Samuel announced. "Good lawyers who can fight for grace." Without hesitation, elderly Miss Martha hobbled to the front with her checkbook. "I may live on a fixed income," she announced, her voice wavering but determined, "but I can give something." She wrote a check and placed it in the offering plate. Others followed. Children emptied piggy banks. Teenagers contributed babysitting money. Business owners wrote substantial checks. The offering plate filled again and again. "We're also going to need character witnesses," Pastor Samuel continued. "People willing to testify about Marcus's character in court." Hands shot up across the sanctuary. The mayor's wife volunteered to speak about Marcus's community service. The local banker offered to verify his responsible financial history. Even the police chief stood, promising to attest to Marcus's outstanding citizenship. Marcus sat in the front pew, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Layla snuggled against his side, her small hand wrapped tightly in his. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he watched his community rally around his family. Pastor Samuel knelt beside Marcus's pew. "You see, son, you're not in this fight alone. God's people take care of their own." For the first time since Grace had been taken, Marcus felt something stir in his chest, a tiny spark of hope, fragile but growing stronger with each person who stood to support him. The weight on his shoulders seemed a little lighter, shared now by the dozens of people filling the sanctuary. The meeting lasted well into the evening. When the final count was announced, the church had raised over $15,000 for legal fees. A list of character witnesses filled 3 pages, and a schedule had been created for providing meals and childcare for Layla during court proceedings. As people began to file out, they stopped to hug Marcus, promising prayers and support. Miss Beverly pressed a casserole into his hands. The church's youth group offered to clean his house. Every gesture, large and small, spoke of love and solidarity. Pastor Samuel's words echoed in Marcus's mind. God never gives us more than we can handle, especially when we handle it together. Looking around at the faces of his church family, Marcus finally believed it might be true. The county courthouse loomed before Marcus like a mountain of stone and steel. Morning sunlight glinted off its tall windows as he straightened his borrowed tie one last time. His hands trembled slightly, but he took a deep breath and whispered the prayer that had become his daily comfort. Lord, give me strength. Inside the crowded courtroom, hard wooden benches creaked under the weight of what seemed like half the town. Marcus recognized faces from his church, neighbors, and even regular customers from the garage. They nodded encouragingly as he made his way to the front. Grace's maternal relatives sat across the aisle, their expensive suits and confident postures a stark contrast to Marcus's humble appearance. Their lawyer, Mr. Patterson, stood tall in an immaculate 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. "All rise," the bailiff's voice boomed through the room. Judge Harriet Collins entered, her black robes flowing as she took her seat at the bench. Her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose as she reviewed the papers before her. "You may be seated," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "We're here today to determine custody of Grace Reed. Mr. Patterson, you may present your case." Mr. Patterson rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, my clients can provide Grace with every advantage in life. Private schools, summer camps, music lessons, travel opportunities, advantages Mr. Reed simply cannot match." He gestured toward the relatives. "They live in a gated community with excellent security. Their home has 6 bedrooms, including a nursery already prepared for Grace. Marcus's heart sank as Patterson continued listing material benefits. The lawyer pulled out photographs of a pristine white mansion with manicured gardens. "This is where Grace could grow up, Your Honor. Compare that to Mr. Reed's." He paused deliberately. "Modest rental home." Marcus felt his face flush with shame, but then he felt a gentle touch on his shoulder. Mrs. Wilson, his elderly neighbor, had reached forward from the bench behind him. Her weathered hand gave him a reassuring pat. Marcus's lawyer, Sarah Chen, stood next. She wasn't wearing designer clothes, but her eyes blazed with conviction. "Your Honor, while the opposing counsel speaks of material wealth, we're here to talk about something far more valuable: love, dedication, and the true meaning of family." She turned to face the courtroom. "I'd like to call our first witness, Mrs. Eleanor Wilson." The elderly woman who had touched Marcus's shoulder made her way to the witness stand. Though her steps were slow, her voice was clear and strong. "I've lived next door to Marcus Reed for 8 years, Mrs. Wilson began. When his first daughter Layla was just starting school, I used to watch him walk her to the bus stop every morning, rain or shine. He'd stand there until that bus disappeared around the corner, waving the whole time." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "And now with baby Grace, well, I've never seen a father so devoted. When she arrived, that man worked all day at the garage, then stayed up all night with her when she was colicky. Never complained once." More witnesses followed. Marcus's pastor spoke about his faithful attendance at church, even when exhausted from night shifts, always making sure his daughters were there to learn about God's love. The owner of the garage testified about Marcus's work ethic, how he'd pick up extra shifts to provide for his family, while never missing important moments in his daughters' lives. Then came Maria Rodriguez, a single mother from their neighborhood. "My car broke down last winter," she testified, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't afford repairs, but I needed it to get to work. Marcus fixed it for free, staying late after his shift. When I tried to pay him in installments, he just said, 'Help someone else when you can.'" She wiped tears from her cheeks. "That's the kind of man he island." Throughout the testimony, Judge Collins listened intently, her eyes moving between the witnesses and Marcus. She watched as he sat quietly, head bowed sometimes in humility, other times looking up with eyes full of love when people spoke about his daughters. The parade of witnesses continued. A teacher described how Marcus never missed a parent-teacher conference, despite working double shifts. A nurse from the hospital recalled the night Grace was found, how tenderly Marcus had held her, how he'd promised right then to protect her forever. Even the gruff owner of the local diner stood up to speak. "That man comes in every Sunday after church with his girls," he said, his voice unusually soft. "He can't afford much, but he makes sure they each get a special treat. The way those children look at him, that's worth more than all the money in the world." Tears flowed freely throughout the courtroom now. Marcus noticed even the bailiff discreetly wiping his eyes. Judge Collins removed her glasses, pressing her fingers to the bridge of her nose for a moment. Sarah Chen approached the bench. "Your Honor, we have more witnesses willing to testify about Marcus Reed's character and devotion as a father. These are not wealthy people, but they represent the community that has embraced this family. They show us that true wealth isn't measured in square footage or bank accounts, but in love, sacrifice, and dedication." She gestured toward Marcus. "This is a man who works extra hours to buy his daughters books instead of toys for himself, who sits up late helping with homework even when he's exhausted, who teaches his children that character matters more than money and that faith can move mountains." Marcus sat quietly, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. A tear rolled down his cheek as he thought of Grace, praying she would come home soon. Judge Collins watched him closely, her expression thoughtful as she observed this moment of raw emotion. The morning sun had climbed higher, streaming through the courthouse windows and filling the room with warm light. It touched the faces of everyone present, the wealthy relatives in their fine clothes, Marcus in his borrowed tie, and all the ordinary people who had come to speak for love over money. In that moment, The differences between them seemed to fade in the golden glow, leaving only the truth of what really mattered in raising a child. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harriet Collins returned to her bench, her black robes rustling softly as she took her seat. Marcus sat rigid in his chair, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Layla's small hand squeezed his tightly, her presence anchoring him in the storm of emotions. The judge adjusted her reading glasses and looked out over the packed courtroom. Every wooden bench was filled with faces Marcus knew, his pastor, elderly church ladies, neighbors, and even some of his regular customers from the auto shop. They had all come to stand with him. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence presented, Judge Collins began, her voice clear and steady. This court must determine what serves the best interest of the child known as Grace Reed. Marcus felt his lawyer's reassuring hand on his shoulder. Across the aisle, Grace's maternal relatives sat straight-backed in expensive suits, their lawyer looking confident despite the emotional testimony they'd just heard. The maternal family has presented compelling arguments regarding their financial resources and social standing, the judge continued. They have demonstrated their ability to provide material advantages that Mr. Reed, as a working-class single father, cannot match. Marcus's heart sank. He bowed his head, trying to hold back tears. Layla pressed closer to his side. However, Judge Collins's tone shifted, causing Marcus to look up. This court has been deeply moved by the extraordinary showing of community support for Mr. Reed. We have heard testimony from neighbors, church members, and local business owners, all speaking to his character, his dedication as a father, and his unwavering love for both his daughters. She removed her glasses, looking directly at Marcus. Mr. Reed, when Grace was left in your care, you didn't hesitate. You didn't question whether you could afford another child. You simply opened your heart and your home, knowing it would mean twice the work, twice the sacrifice. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The pastor of your church testified about how you've never missed a Sunday, even working night shifts. Your daughter's teacher spoke about how Layla always has her homework done and comes to school clean and well cared for despite your demanding schedule. Your elderly neighbor told us how you still find time to mow her lawn every week, refusing payment. The judge's eyes swept across the courtroom. What I've seen here is more than just a custody case. I've witnessed a community coming together to support a man who embodies the very values we should be celebrating: faith, hard work, and sacrificial love. She paused, letting her words settle in the hushed courtroom. While the maternal relatives can offer Grace material advantages, they cannot replace the love of a father who has already proven his devotion. They cannot substitute for a sister who adores her, or a community that has embraced them both as family. Marcus held his breath, hardly daring to hope. Therefore, it is the finding of this court that the best interest of Grace Reed will be served by remaining in the full custody of her biological father, Marcus Reed. The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus sat stunned for a moment before breaking into tears of relief and joy. Layla jumped up and down, hugging him tightly. "Order, please," Judge Collins called, though her stern tone was softened by her slight smile. "Mr. Reed, approach the bench with your attorney." As Marcus walked forward on shaking legs, a social worker appeared with Grace in her arms. The baby was dressed in a tiny pink dress, her dark eyes bright and alert. "Mr. Reed," the judge said warmly, "your daughter is being returned to your custody immediately. This court has every confidence that you will continue to be the loving father she deserves." The social worker placed Grace in Marcus's arms, and he pulled her close, breathing in her sweet baby scent. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he whispered, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you." Layla rushed forward to join them, and Marcus knelt down so she could kiss her baby sister's forehead. The applause grew louder as church members and neighbors surrounded them, many wiping away tears of their own. Marcus looked down at Grace's peaceful face, then at Layla's beaming smile, and felt his heart might burst with gratitude. Through all the doubt and fear, through every late night and weary morning, God had been faithful. His daughters were together, where they belonged, and no power on earth could separate them now. "Let's go home," he whispered to his girls, and in those simple words was everything he'd fought for: family, love, and the grace to begin again. Marcus pulled into his driveway, Grace sleeping peacefully in her car seat, and Layla humming softly beside her. The setting sun painted the sky in warm oranges and pinks, as if celebrating their reunion. Before he could even get out of the truck, he saw Mrs. Thompson from next door hurrying across her lawn with a covered casserole dish. "Welcome home, baby girl," she called out, keeping her voice low enough not to wake Grace. Her eyes were still wet from crying happy tears in the courtroom. As Marcus carefully lifted Grace from her car seat, more cars began pulling up along the street. Pastor Mike and his wife arrived with bags full of groceries. The Williams family brought homemade fried chicken. The elderly ladies from the church's prayer group came bearing pies and warm hugs. Inside, the house that had felt so empty without Grace quickly filled with love and laughter. The kitchen counter disappeared under dishes of food, mac and cheese, collard greens, sweet potato pie, and Mrs. Rodriguez's famous tamales. The aroma of home-cooked meals mixed with the sweet scent of fresh flowers someone had brought. "Look at all these people who love us, Grace," Layla whispered to her sister, who was now awake and taking in the scene with wide eyes. She sat in Marcus's favorite armchair, carefully holding Grace while their father greeted guests. Marcus moved through the crowd, accepting hugs and handshakes, his eyes growing misty at each person's kind words. "We never doubted you'd get her back," said old Mr. Jenkins, patting Marcus's shoulder. "A father's love is stronger than money any day." In the kitchen, the church ladies had taken over, setting out paper plates and plastic cups, organizing the food into a proper buffet line. "You just focus on those precious girls," Mrs. Thompson insisted when Marcus tried to help. "We've got this handled." Pastor Mike gathered everyone in the living room, where people perched on chairs, sofas, and even the floor. "Let's say grace," he announced, and heads bowed as he thanked God for bringing Grace home and for showing the power of community. The house hummed with conversation and occasional bursts of laughter. Children played quietly in corners while adults shared plates of food and stories about the past few weeks. Marcus noticed how naturally people took turns holding Grace, passing her carefully from one set of loving arms to another, each person cooing and making silly faces at her. "Your daddy's something special," he overheard Mrs. Williams telling Layla. "The way he fought for your sister, that's real love right there." Layla beamed with pride. "I knew we'd get her back," she said. "I prayed every night, and God listened." As evening settled in, people began saying their goodbyes, leaving containers of leftovers and promises to check in soon. The house grew quieter, though no less warm. Marcus sat in his rocking chair, Grace snuggled against his chest, while Layla helped Mrs. Thompson and Pastor Mike's wife clean up the kitchen. "You've got yourself a real helper there," Mrs. Thompson said, nodding toward Layla as she carefully wrapped plates of food. "That child's got an old soul." Marcus watched his older daughter move efficiently through the kitchen, directing the cleanup like a tiny manager. "She's been my rock through all this," he said softly. "Don't know what I'd have done without her." The last guests left as night fell, leaving behind a house that smelled of good food and echoed with the memory of friendship. Marcus had changed Grace and given her a bottle, and now she was starting to drift off in his arms. The gentle creaking of the rocking chair mixed with the soft sounds of Layla putting away the last of the dishes. When she finished, Layla padded over to the rocking chair in her sock feet. She climbed carefully onto the wide arm of the chair, leaning against her father's shoulder. Together, they watched Grace's eyes flutter closed, her tiny fingers curled around Marcus's thumb. "We're whole again," Layla whispered, her voice full of contentment and peace. Marcus felt tears well up in his eyes as he looked at his daughters, one sleeping in his arms, one curled trustingly against his side. After weeks of heartache and fear, after all the prayers and tears and fighting, his family was complete. God had brought them through the storm, stronger than ever. The porch swing creaked softly as Marcus gently rocked back and forth, the winter night wrapping around him like a familiar blanket. Grace, now a year old, dozed contentedly in the crook of his right arm, her tiny fingers curled around his shirt. 8-year-old Layla snuggled against his left side, a thick quilt draped over all three of them to ward off the December chill. Above them, the night sky exploded with color. Red, blue, and gold sparks rained down over their small southern town, each burst painting wonder across Layla's upturned face. The same fireworks that had lit the sky exactly 1 year ago, when Marcus had found that tiny bundle in his truck, but everything felt different now. "Daddy," Layla whispered, not wanting to wake her sister. "Remember last New Year's? When you found Grace?" Marcus smiled, pulling her closer. "How could I forget, baby? That was the night everything changed. I was so scared when they took her away," Layla admitted, her voice small. She reached over to touch Grace's curly hair. "But you never gave up." "Neither did you," Marcus reminded her. "You were the one who kept telling me to have faith, remember?" Grace stirred at their voices, her eyelids fluttering. Marcus adjusted the pink hat on her head, marveling at how much she'd grown. She had her mother's eyes, just like he'd noticed that first night, but her smile was all his, bright and determined. Another firework burst overhead, this one a shower of silver sparks that reflected in Layla's eyes. The boom echoed across their neighborhood, and Grace startled slightly before settling back against Marcus's chest. "Shh, sweet girl," he murmured, patting her back. "Just celebrating how far we've come." The past year played through his mind like a movie, the shock of finding Grace, the joy of knowing she was his, the heart-wrenching fight to keep her, and the triumph of bringing her home for good. Through it all, his faith had grown stronger, deeper. His community had become family, showing up with casseroles and baby clothes, filling courthouse benches, and lifting his spirits when hope seemed lost. "Look, Daddy," Layla pointed, as 3 fireworks exploded simultaneously, creating a cascade of purple and gold. "It's like God's throwing us a party," Marcus chuckled, the sound rumbling in his chest. "Maybe he is, baby girl. Maybe he island." From inside the house, he could hear the muffled sounds of their celebration. Church members, neighbors, and friends had gathered for a New Year's Eve potluck, their laughter and conversation drifting through the windows. Miss Rosa was probably still fussing over the dessert table, and Pastor Jim would be telling stories that made everyone groan and smile at the same time. But Marcus had needed this moment. Just him and his girls, marking the anniversary of the night that had changed everything. Grace wiggled in his arms, her eyes opening fully now. She gazed up at the sparkly sky and let out a delighted squeal, reaching toward the lights with chubby fingers. "See that, Gracie?" Layla cooed, holding her sister's hand. "Pretty lights for you." Marcus watched his daughters together, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. Layla had taken to being a big sister, like she was born for it, helping with bottles and diapers, singing lullabies, and fiercely defending Grace during the custody battle. Even now, she was protective, making sure the blanket covered Grace's feet and that her hat hadn't slipped. The porch light cast a warm glow around them, and more fireworks painted the sky. Each boom seemed to mark another blessing, the judges ruling in their favor, Grace's first steps just last week, Layla's straight-A report card, the promotion at the garage that had helped him provide for his growing family. "Daddy?" Layla's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Are you crying?" Marcus hadn't even noticed the tears on his cheeks. He wiped them away with his free hand, smiling. "Happy tears, baby. Just happy tears." Grace reached up and patted his face with a tiny hand, babbling what sounded like "Dada." She'd started saying it recently, and every time, it made his heart skip a beat. From inside, they heard the countdown beginning. 10, 9, 8. Layla sat up straighter, excitement radiating from her. "Should we go in?" Marcus shook his head. "Let's stay right here. This is perfect." 5, 4, 3. Grace clapped her hands, caught up in the excitement, though she didn't understand why. 2, 1. Happy New Year. The sky erupted in the grandest display yet, fireworks bursting in every direction. Cheers and noisemakers sounded from inside and from neighboring houses. Car horns honked in the distance. The whole world seemed to be celebrating with them. In that moment, with the new year dawning and his daughters safe in his arms, Marcus felt a peace that went bone deep. The struggles of the past year had only made this victory sweeter. His faith had been tested and proven stronger than ever. He pulled both girls closer, breathing in the baby powder smell of Grace's hair and the strawberry shampoo Layla loved. The fireworks continued overhead, but the real magic was right here on this porch swing. Marcus kissed Grace's forehead, then Layla's, his voice thick with emotion as he whispered, "This was the year God gave me Grace." What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Marcus Reed, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.